Hello, welcome back to the UK Medical Freedom Alliance. My name is Ian Humphreys and I am very excited to be joined by Dr Teck Khong today. It's a very, very exciting day for me, I have to say. But before we invite Teck into the conversation, just a few bits of housekeeping to do. Firstly, you can see our website address here, ukmedfreedom.org. Please visit. There you can see all of our campaigns, catch up with what we've been up to over the last few years. And you can, of course, make a donation, which would be fabulous because it helps us keep this channel alive. It always helps us keep the campaigns going, and also the various open letters and the expertise that we draw into the organisation. So that'd be very, very helpful. Thank you. On another note, just some of the comments that we may make during these videos aren't necessarily the views of the UK Medical Freedom Alliance, but the majority of them I think you'll probably find are. So without any further ado, let me introduce you to Dr Teck Khong. Dr Khong, thank you so much for joining me.
Good morning, Ian. Thank you for the invitation. Good to be here.
Well, I'm very grateful. As I say, it's an exciting day for me because obviously because your association with the organisation anyway, I've certainly known about you for a long time, but never had the opportunity to have discussions with you and catch up with you. So this is absolutely a lovely experience. Thank you. Now, we did have an opportunity to have a chat yesterday, so we've got some idea about what we're going to talk about. And I think everyone knows already what the UK Medical Freedom Alliance is all about, but I really would like to know what the Alliance for Democracy and Freedom is all about, and how you came to be the leader of that organisation, which I understand now is a political party.
Yes, so, thank you very much. The party was actually registered on the 19th of August 2020, a few months before the Medical Freedom Alliance came into being. I think you were established in October of 2020.
Yes.
Well, what it is we're a band of people who were with various parties in the past. The four founders predominantly came from UKIP. So there was Mike Hookham, Ernie Warrender, Paul Goldring, and Keith Lonsdale. And I was invited to join a little bit after that because of my interest in health policies. And they saw that it would be an opportunity to enhance the mission of the new party, given my long association with the health sector. My interest in politics came back in the early 2000s when I realized the policies in health were flawed and weren't actually in the interest of the people, especially the working people who form predominantly the majority of my practice population. But fast forward to ADF, Alliance for Democracy and Freedom. The name was chosen with particular emphasis on alliance. We realized there were new parties forming, some fragmenting away from UKIP, some new parties disenchanted with the way the electorate was disenfranchised. So we thought alliance was a good word so that we can actually gather all the good people, the patriotic people of the country together on a platform of solidarity. And we picked on the second word, which is democracy. As you know, it's been very heavily subverted, and we have what is, to all external appearances, a democracy, but really very little in effect. And finally, we thought freedom was the main asset of the party and what people yearn for as things were closing in. We saw in the preceding years people had to fight to gain our sovereignty from the EU. So freedom would be a good word to add in. And it took quite some months to get the Electoral Commission to approve the word. But finally we got all three in a complete heading as the Alliance for Democracy and Freedom. Now, in terms of our unique selling point, I think what's unique is the way it endeavours to take activism back to the grassroots. So rather than have branches and a cumbersome system of organisation from the centre, we have what we call proud of groups. So if you are in, say, Oldham, we have a group called Proud of Oldham, we have a group Proud of Wakefield, and so on. So that encourages people to take an interest in local affairs. We've seen activism increase in those areas where we've set up Proud of groups. We encourage our candidates, whether at the local level or national level, to be answerable to the local electorate. So we don't have a whip system. It isn't for the central office to dictate to people in, say, Bradford or whatever it is, that they should vote in a particular way. The majority of the people would voice their wishes to the candidate, and that's the candidate's responsibility to reflect the wishes of the electorate. And then we have proud of as defined by vocation. So I normally head the proud of healthcare workers. We have a lady farmer in Hartlepool who runs a proud of British farmers. So we interdigitate. We have proud of groups according to community setting, and we also have proud of groups that champion the vocation of its members. So I think that takes not only activism but democracy back to grassroots level.
So it's very different to a standard party then, isn't it?
Yes.
What we're used to.
Yes. So I'm very pleased that Liz invited me to join the panel of UKMFA. There is a lot of synergy between what UKMFA does as a group, championing all the right things in the medical circles. And I see ADF, the Alliance for Democracy and Freedom, as an umbrella organisation that has very staunch support for bodies like UKMFA. So long may it continue.
Thank you. And it's interesting that how health is connected to everything as well, isn't it? So everything that political parties do, everything that governments decide they're going to do on our behalf affects our health one way or another.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. I think yesterday we spoke about an old saying, a phrase, health, wealth and happiness. And I'm adamant that without good health, the other two will be most elusive, perhaps unattainable.
Yes, absolutely. And your experience, obviously, of being a GP must have had a great impact on your decision to move into politics then.
Very much so. I was fortunate to have one of my patients who was the leader of the Conservative group in Leicestershire County Council. So the late Anna Pullen was very observant. She noticed that I was very passionate about getting health delivered properly to the poorer people. I was practicing in one of the 10 poorest wards in the country. But she made a very wise statement saying that, look, Teck, if you really want to help the people of the country, sitting behind a desk and making a lot of noise, even holding positions in the local medical committee or the presidency of the county branch of the BMA, doesn't achieve anything at all, because she said, what you perform, how you conduct the business, is actually according to legislation handed from on high. So the only way to actually improve health was to take an active role, or is in fact a present tense, I would say, take an active role in the legislature. So she encouraged me to take an interest in politics. The rest is history. Obviously, I sat for the Parliamentary Assessment Board exam and got in. But it didn't matter to me whether it was the Conservative Party or the Labour Party or Lib Dem. My single passion was to ensure that health was done properly. And 20 years later, I'm still here trying to find that corner.
And the problem seems to be that, as you've touched on there, all of these various parties who have all got their political agendas, whilst they're fighting between themselves and trying to get into government or trying to get into local authorities or whichever power element they want to get into, we're losing out.
Yes, indeed. You see, the conundrum with a lot of politicians, I think they first want to distinguish themselves, and sometimes that can veer towards, very personal advantages, seeking personal advantages. But there's also something that's not quite right, and that's very partisan loyalties, because I think the mission of politicians is actually hampered by political divides. And what we should be cognizant of is the people's wishes. And I see myself, the reason why I took very late interest in politics is my role was to serve the people, and I think medicine offered a perfect vehicle to do that. But in politics, I mean, you find politicians answerable to the ethos of the party, which I think in this country is anachronistically divided into left and right, which isn't appropriate because we're all a whole. We shouldn't divide a country up into left or right. So we decided to make ADF what we call a centre-sensible party. We'll do what is right, and we will defy any journalistic attempts to pigeonhole us into the left wing or the right wing of the political spectrum. We don't believe in spectrums. So the other thing has to do with understanding health. I think a lot of politicians fail to understand that the NHS was actually a very virtuous concept. And what has subverted it over the years is the adulteration of the values within the NHS. I'm not sure whether you've heard of the tripartite compact. It is the compact between the government, the people, and the profession. So what happens in the tripartite compact that underpins the NHS is the government takes the money in form of taxes from the people and pays the medical profession, the doctors, nurses, and so on, to look after the people. So it's a tripartite compact. Now, over the years, unfortunately, the tripartite compact has been distorted by all manner of things, but predominantly the administration of the compact. So we have government using incentives to reach targets. Some of the incentives used have been so unethical to the extent that they have actually deprived the profession of the true autonomy that follows ethical lines. So, for example, I once stood up in the CCG meeting saying that we should not have incentivization to pursue end-of-life protocols or induce people to make those, write those forms up for patients. Because I said, look, we as qualified doctors should be able to discuss with the patient, if not the nearest and dearest of the patient, the needs. And they don't have to be set in a document that is quite immovable, and above all, to pay doctors a sum of money to do that. That takes away professional integrity. There are things like changing from an expensive drug to a cheaper drug, which I, in most circumstances, see to be false economy. Again, that is also distortion. So financial incentives have been a ploy used by health authorities to sort of maneuver the doctors, manipulate them in terms of the habits, much to the detriment of the purity of healthcare delivery.
Is this because their surgeries are being run as essentially businesses?
I don't think so. I think even if I was fully salaried, I don't expect the government to come and tell me, or certainly the management to come and tell me that, you need to change from atorvastatin to simvastatin and we'll give you 50 pence a patient. It's for me to decide the merits or demerits of a particular therapeutic choice. And I decide that on a case-by-case basis. I think to interfere at a very granular level is utterly wrong.
And that interference, it seems to me, as a patient, and recent experiences I've had with NHS doctors and treatment offered, that the diagnosis is being done essentially by computer. So they're sitting in front of a computer, pumping in your symptoms. Then on screen something is being presented that says this is likely the cause of the symptoms, and now here's the drug you need to prescribe.
Yes, I think that's a very wrong use of technology. You see, the medical school intake is based on achievement, distinction, and aptitude. So you take the best of school leavers, you train them, develop the clinical acumen, and then when they qualify, you let them decide in the best interest of the patient. You don't supply them with protocols and guidelines. Now, when I first entered general practice, the basic practice allowance formed the bulk of my income. When I left general practice, it was a very, very small percentage. The bulk of the income came with meeting targets, reaching certain incentives, and so on. So I think money motivates a lot of people, but in the wrong sorts of way. What I like to do is to achieve a balance between giving doctors a reasonable income, but the main ambition, the main aim is to actually to serve the patients. So it's a tall order, but I'm confident with the right support we can actually achieve that.
So how would you tackle this? So we spoke yesterday on the telephone, and we talked about the number of small parties now that are popping up around the country who clearly have very similar views but also have differences, but are trying to take on this. Well, many people describe it this way. I certainly describe it as a uni-party. There's no choice between the two major parties right now. Their policies seem to be very, very close. And as we say here in Essex, you can't get a fag paper between the two. And for people like me, the voting public, the simple guy that lives in Essex, how do I make a choice? How do I find a political home? Because at the moment I certainly feel politically homeless. And you need to be able to find a party that you feel will be able to get into local and national government.
Thank you again. That I've made some notes. I think you have several questions within one question. Party. I mentioned at the beginning that the Alliance for Democracy and Freedom chosen a very totemic title for the organization. We want to be an alliance. We want to represent freedom, and we want to fight for democracy. Now, the way it's been approached is absolutely genuine and sincere. I invited various people from the respective parties to meet with us and discuss ways of working together, from cooperation to full integration and mergers. We managed to merge with Time Party. I've met with Richard Tice. We've spoken with Lawrence Foxfield to meet him on a number of occasions. We've met with Neil Hamilton of UKIP. We met with SDP, William Clouston. So we've done a lot of homework, and we were sincere in our ambition to work together for the greater good of the people. The ambition was actually crystallized in a declaration called the Belmont Declaration, which was set up on the 25th of September 2021. As far as health is concerned, I think I would say this very humbly. In the 20-odd years that I've been in politics, I have not come across any politician who has a real understanding of what it takes to get our NHS moving, serving the people, improving rather than declining. And for the 40-odd years or so I've been in medicine, there hasn't been a single reorganization, so-called reform, that has benefited the country. So there's a big vacuum, and we hope to get all the parties together. I certainly would do my bit to help in redeveloping health. And really, our country is very, very strong on intellect, powerful in vision as before, but it seems to have lost its way. So I think it behoves all of us to work together and get the nation to where it is. I know I might sound biased, but I'm very committed to the ADF, and I think we have the perfect platform. I would certainly not let egos get in the way. I was prepared to resign for a younger person to take over, if that's the case, and support my mentoring or whatever it is in healthcare policies. So the ambition is there, the sincerity is there, certainly with all the members and all the board members of the ADF, to work with other people for the good of the country. Now, on the assertion that there is not a fact paper between the two parties, I would say this. We have been subsumed under the European Union for far too long, and our political class has lost the will to legislate in the interest of the people, and delegated that function quite significantly to a foreign, a supranational body. And the same is happening in health. I mean, we are in the throes of submitting ourselves to the United Nations and the WHO in the form of the Pandemic Preparedness Treaty. And I think, Matt Hancock went on television outside College Green saying that, it's the way forward. We must share good practices and so on. I would like to actually remind people that to share good practices, you do not have to have a treaty. You can have an agreement. You can have a partnership, but you don't have to have a treaty, which binds you legally and offers your sovereignty to other people to take charge. And that is not the way. In a similar vein, for example, when people say, the EU is a trading bloc, it might have started as a trading bloc, but it didn't stop at being a trading bloc. No. Because I don't think a trading bloc requires an anthem, a flag, a parliament, none of these things. So I think politics has entered an era where there needs to be a rude awakening of the majority of the people to what's happening. And we as a country, our dignity as a nation is being decimated by supranational influences and forces. And we have to accept that. I mean, this gentleman called Klaus Schwab unashamedly said on open media that he has penetrated cabinets and governments. And that is a very poignant statement to comprehend. We have to understand that we no longer are looking after our sovereignty. And we have to. So whether it's health, whether it's in terms of our national economy, our social stability, we need to have our direction back.
And how do we reach people with that message? Because as we discussed yesterday, there's a lot of echo chambers.
Yes, indeed.
And we need to get outside of those echo chambers and reach ordinary people.
I certainly do my bit in the social media platforms. I say as much as I can without being censored. And that's the other thing. You see, censorship has been the bane of a lot of freedom fighters. Within the medical circles, I'll come back to the greater picture in a while. When COVID was declared a pandemic I think it was back in February, March 2020, there were certain anomalies which very soon caught my attention. I mean, things like lockdowns. So lockdowns didn't actually have a physical ability apart from the penalty of being arrested and fined. But if you fast forward it, we have low traffic neighborhoods. We have ULEZ. We have 15-minute cities. Now, you just think about it. Once these things come to pass, the next era of lockdown will be so much easier to achieve, because when you have low traffic neighborhoods, all you need to do is to close up a neighborhood and you have complete lockdown. So I think we've got to be aware of the changes that are happening in society. We will eventually reach a stage where we are contained. We're contained in physical presence in terms of mobility, our freedom to move about. We will be contained in terms of our choice, our bodily autonomy. Now, I've cast you back to the COVID vaccinations. So you have a medical product running along in phase 3, something that has potentially far-reaching consequences, still in phase 3 clinical trial position, fast-forwarded, mass rollout, and broken every law, every rule in the ethical conduct of clinical trials. So it did not have sufficient safety and long-term data. There was no informed consent, which is again based on advising people, participants of the risks and benefits. There was no monitoring system. So you gave these shots to people and you tell them merrily to go away. Any other problems will be just minor, transient, and you'll be all right. So we didn't have informed consent. We didn't have long-term safety data. We didn't have safety monitoring. And then when doctors started talking about things, there was censorship. Science doesn't progress with censorship. You've got to have a free discussion so that science moves on through mistakes, through understanding, through discovery, to achieve the benefits for mankind. None of those things were followed. Every rule in the Helsinki Declaration was broken.
What do you think's going on when the likes of you and I try to explain this to our friends, relatives, neighbours, and they look at you as if you're crazy, they're making it up, it can't be true? What has got into them where they can't even accept it from an expert like yourself?
We are in a very propaganda-driven environment now. You must have seen recently when talking about climate, we have a warm summer, and they took the opportunity to say we are heading towards global boiling, not just global warming, but global boiling. And then the next few days, it will turn cool again. Well, you might think this is just Britain, but if you look at the maps across the world and so on, talk to people in other countries, there is certainly a use of misinformation to disinform people. And we have the same situation. I mean, I very bluntly said on a podcast about COVID vaccines, I said, look, if the vaccine was so good, why do people with multiple shots end up getting COVID, and people who don't either don't get it or just have a very transient illness? So we have a mountain to climb. We have a mountain to climb against vested interests who drive perverse propaganda, and we have people who are so subordinate to authority that they'll believe everything and anything the authorities say. I think we have to be very pointed. Instead of using social media, I also go out to meet people in pubs and clubs, because I think it's important to meet people in person, to display sincerity, to display honesty and integrity in discussion, in pursuing arguments that are not only valid, but which are factual. So I do road shows, for example. I've been around Scotland. I've been to Pitlochry, Perth, Dundee. I've done road shows to Skegness. It's a matter of meeting people. But eventually I have to home in on a constituency where I'll fight, and I expect to be supported by like-minded thinking people.
What's happened to the doctors, Teck?
It's very difficult. I mean, I've spoken with people like Sam White and David Cartland. They've been censured for suggesting anything that is not in an official narrative. These people have made very cogent arguments about alternative treatments. For example, it's quite right that vaccination is not the only route to containing an infection. If you get an infection, first determine the severity of the illness. If there are alternative ways, such as treating with antibiotics, treating with antivirals, whatever it is, we shouldn't be predominantly choosing one route. Now, in the COVID situation, for example, we know there are lots of adverse events. And, some doctors would read about them and choose to ignore them. But I personally have come across at the front line myocarditis in young patients, thrombotic episodes in young patients, curious recurrences of shingles. There are lots and lots of things which are inexplicable. Now, some have a very direct, short temporal relationship to the vaccination. Some may have longer time scales, but we're dealing with something that is not all or nothing, black or white. Just as in any biological system, you get a gradation of responses and variation. I mean, you can take a peanut and get no problem. I can take a peanut and collapse with anaphylaxis.
Right.
So just because it hasn't affected some people doesn't mean it's good for everyone else. So I think the biology of nature is such that we have to be cognizant of people's different responses. But then when you come across figures most unexpected of recurrent shingles, high incidence of myocarditis in young people, and sudden deaths and so on, you cannot ignore these things. And I think it's a travesty of justice to shut people down from discussion. It's really wrong.
Yeah. But they wouldn't have got the emergency use authorization if there were other treatments available, as I understand it.
I think there are very powerful interests that are being pursued. It's far too nasty for words, to be honest. I think I have to be polite here.
We say follow the money.
Follow the money, follow the science. No, it's all con.
Yeah. So what's next for you? What's the plan now?
The plan is continuing to support people, support organizations, and also seek electoral reform. You see, a lot of people would say, why don't you do more marches and do more of this, more petitions? I would say this in reply. You can shout as much as you like, protest as many times as you want, send as many petitions in as you wish. And if it becomes significant, the politicians might budge a little bit, offer a piecemeal change, and placate any resistance. But ultimately, if you keep the chamber in the same constitution, by the same ethos, you would not have changed politics. You would not have improved the life for the people. So the only way to actually change the political system and the social environment is to actually evict the errant MPs, the fraudulent parties out of Parliament, and ensure that we get the good, people-serving politicians and parties into the legislature. We got to have legislature cleaned up, in Donald Trump's words, drain the swamp.
So where does that leave organisations like ours? So because obviously we are still campaigning, we have tried to attend the COVID hearings and have been rejected on each occasion, which we are going to be publicising despite the fact that they asked us to not talk about it, the fact that we've been rejected. But I think that's something we've definitely got to talk about.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I think you can talk about it, but the reason for your disappointment is the fact that the authorities do not have any ear for alternative views, are not prepared to listen to factual material being presented, and that is the most evil subversion I can think of.
It's even happened on a criminal basis. So where criminal cases have been submitted, the police have not even considered them.
Yes.
The furthest they got was issuing a crime number, but they did nothing else.
Which brings me back to the point. The only way to change it is not by marches, by petitions, by confronting them, but to actually win at the ballot box with the people's support. And that is why I'm so passionate about getting people on our side to win the next election.
Right. Okay. Well, I think that's great. I think we've covered just about everything that we thought you would cover. Is there anything else that you'd like to wrap the interview up with?
Well, I would say this. I mean, it might be a shout out for the Alliance for Democracy and Freedom, but it isn't my party. It is your party. It is the party of the people. The more you join, the more people who join it, the more people who are willing to help shape it, the better it is for our country and society at large. It doesn't belong to anyone, but it belongs to everyone. And that's the way to view it. It is not guided by any selfish ethos. It is there to serve the nation. Just think about it. Think about what I say. Think about what I do. My time on earth is very short. And I've been through a lot. I've seen a lot. And I've dealt with a lot of very poor people, very deprived people, very sick people. I wish all these people well. And I wish the nation a bright future. We can do it, and we must do it. We cannot delegate to anybody else.
Thank you. Bless you, Teck. Thanks so much. And I'm sure we'll speak again. All right.
Thank you, Ian.
Cheers. Well, my thanks to Teck. That was a great interview. Really enjoyed that. Don't forget, you'll be able to see the recording of this interview on rumble.com, rumble.com/UKMFA. You'll find all of our broadcasts there. And I hope you enjoy them, and please comment if you can. Please also choose the follow option so that you will get reminded when more videos are submitted. Rumble's quite easy. You just need to sign up very, very briefly. It's just a free subscription just to show that you're a member of Rumble, and then you can follow us, get all the alerts. You'll also find us on YouTube too. UKMFA, just search for that and you'll find us on YouTube. And you can obviously subscribe there too, and you can click the notification bell, etc. for more alerts. Well, thank you so much. Please don't forget, you'll find us at ukmedfreedom.org, where you can donate if you wish, and that would be wonderful. Okay, I'll see you very soon. Thank you so much.